Okay, Mr. Chairman, we are now live. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to a virtual meeting of the Residents' Education and Environmental Services Policy Overview Committee of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Bridges and I am Chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and hold in-depth reviews on topics of residents' interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. For those present during the meeting and intended to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. And before we start, some important online housekeeping for everyone present. Please ensure your mobile phones around you are on silent or switched off. If wearing a headset, ensure a microphone is away from your mouth to avoid any noise. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking and then unmute to speak. And only one person may speak at a time, and I as chairman will call on those to speak. And before we move on to the agenda, I'd like to do a roll call of the councillors present to confirm attendance. Please indicate you are present when I say your name. The Vice Chairman, Councillor Morgan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Vardia. Councillor Kaufman.
Mic muted. Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chapman.
Good evening, Chairman. Yes, I'm present.
Thank you. Good evening to you as well. Councillor Rodriguez.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Good evening to you. The opposition lead, Councillor Sweeting.
Good evening, everybody. I'm present.
Thank you very much. A substitute for Councillor Mavers this evening. A warm welcome to Councillor Lamana.
Thank you, Chair. I'm present.
Thank you very much. And our co-opted member, Mr. Little.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm present.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Also, please can the officers present indicate they are also in this meeting. Debbie Scarborough, Adult and Community Learning Services Manager.
Good evening, Chair. I'm present.
Good evening. Victoria Borman, Flood and Water Management.
Good evening, Chair. I'm present.
Good evening. And our Democratic Services Officer, Neil Fraser.
Yes, I'm present, Chairman.
Thank you very much. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, example a lost connection, I will continue the meeting unless we are not caught. Quorum is 5 councillors. Importantly, any councillor who does leave the meeting for a period of time will not be able to vote on that item they were not present on. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available on the YouTube underneath the broadcast. With that said, we move on to apologies for absence, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. You have stolen my thunder. It was Councillor Mavers' apologies with Councillor Lamana present as substitute.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indication. Thank you. I can confirm that we have a part 2 item this evening, partly on item 6. There will be a video shown to members. Sorry, Neil, are you indicating?
Just to let you know that Councillor Radia has now joined the meeting, Councillor.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, there is a video presentation in item 6, and due to potential non-consent with those shown in the video to show it in a public forum, we will move that video to part 2, and everything else on the agenda tonight will be in part 1. Item 4 is to agree the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 10. Councillor Sweeting, I understand you have a correction?
Yes, it's a clarity, actually. Page 5, the third paragraph from the bottom, it's concerning the Willows. It says some special schools, such as the Willows, but it's actually concerning the Willows. And I said it had appeared to have double the number of pupils than the planned place number. I'm very grateful for Neil and other officers providing information on specials, and as well as other information that we got only today. But what I wanted to highlight and query is the planned place number for this school is actually 38, but the number on roll is 59. So my query is, why is this? Why has the number on roll far exceeded the planned place number? And if this is going to continue, when are we going to have an increase of the planned place number for that school? This is coming from residents. Some of the residents in that area have noticed, I believe, an increase in the number of vehicles coming into that school. So it's to clarify that.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Neil, are you happy to note that and liaise with the officers and come back to myself and the Labour lead?
I will indeed, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Apart from that, are those minutes agreed? Yes, thank you. Item 5 is our information item on flooding, pages 11 to 18. Again, a very warm welcome to you, Victoria. Please give your presentation when you're ready to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the invite to present to you. I won't go over some of the information I presented in the paper. I'll go through a quick overview of flooding and the roles and draw your attention to the Appendix A, which I think was of interest to a number of your members in terms of actions. The council has a flooding team consisting of myself and James Latham. We deliver the council's statutory role as a lead local flood authority under the Floods and Water Management Act. So we have the lead for certain elements of flood risk, surface water, groundwater and ordinary watercourses. The Environment Agency and other what is termed risk management authorities lead on other aspects. There are also obviously responsibilities for private landowners and other people, and I think our communications team came up with a really useful diagram that we have on our website to help try and explain the complexity of some of these issues and the roles and responsibilities. Flooding is often very complex in terms of where it comes from, and I appreciate that the residents don't really mind if they're being flooded. It doesn't really matter where it's coming from. They want to see that something is being done, and that all organisations are working together to try and ensure that there are actions taken to alleviate those issues. I've put in some useful information about the roles and responsibilities of various different departments. Obviously, as a team of two, we can't deal with all of those flooding issues. Some of the services within the local council, like our highways team, our green spaces team and facilities, all have a role to play in how we as the council manage the elements that we're responsible for as a landowner, and obviously as our statutory role as well. Specifically, one of the sort of ongoing and I know regular issues that get raised are block gullies that our highways team manage. They clear our gullies on an annual basis. They go through the 32,000 of them, which is quite a considerable amount every year, and they also have allocated, in consultation with us, some high priority gullies that they clear more often, so where there are particular sort of flooding hotspots. Obviously, in more recent times and events, we've had a number of heavy storms, and often what is complicated is that sort of the water that runs from the gullies runs into the Thames Water sewers, which Thames Water as a water utility are responsible for. So it does become very complicated when you see a puddle of water on the road. It's not always obvious exactly where that is, or where the blockage is, or where the issue might be in that system. And so obviously, we try and make sure that we understand what those issues are and try and then work out what our opportunities are to try and alleviate those. And that's including things like sustainable drainage, which includes sort of holding water in areas of green space and other things that can hold that water and can be sacrificial to reduce the risk to our residents, and obviously safety issues on our highways as well. I've also included in the report some useful information about sort of what the council does actually when there is a particular sort of event or incident that may occur. we have emergency response officers who are on call to respond to these issues, and have certainly been very busy over the last winter responding to issues, as you may well be aware of in recent events in West Drayton in October and January, where our local authority liaison officer was called out to respond to flooding of a number of residents there. All of the events that occur, the council has a statutory duty to undertake an investigation for those significant events. So we deem that to be particularly internal flooding within our property. So the flooding team collects this information from all the different sources that there may be available from various organisations. We have to do a lot of work to obtain that information from various other parties, as well as collecting that from our own internal services to get a picture of actually what has happened. And we pull that together in a flood investigation that has to be published. That's a statutory requirement. We have published a number of those already within the council web pages, and I've provided a useful link to those pages within the report if you want to have a look at those in more detail. Apologies, they're quite long. We seem to have had a number of events over the last few years. Within those reports, we have listed the things that we're required to as a statutory duty, which says that the organisations that are involved, in terms of the organisations that may have to undertake some form of investigation themselves. Obviously, as the council, we can point out whether other organisations may have to take action. We can't and don't have ability to undertake all of those actions where it is another organisation's remit, for example, Thames Water on a sewer. But we hold a record and a list of all of those actions that we've asked those organisations to do, and that's held within that flood investigation. We have collated for you a summary of some of the key projects that have arisen from a number of those key events that have occurred. These are the key events and issues that have occurred. I've tried to give you a scale of the issues that have and the number of people that have been affected in those areas, and then the sorts of projects that are arising from them. They vary completely in terms of scale and nature. And some are projects that we as the council are leading and investigating, and I'm working with other services to indicate and investigate what we may be able to do, whilst making sure we don't compromise obviously the needs of residents to use parks for recreation and other things, as well as working with the Environment Agency, for example, looking at the River Pin along its whole length at the moment to identify opportunities for alleviating flooding. So I would be happy to take sort of questions on all of the sort of proposed actions and the projects that we're working on. Bear in mind, these are some of the key projects. There are a number of other much smaller sort of actions that we are working with other parties and other services to deliver, all of which contribute to reducing flood risk, and those are contained within the local flood risk management strategy that we set out a number of years ago to try and deliver, and that includes, as well as these site-specific projects, some very generic ones about the planning policies that we might have, and other sort of generic Hillingdon-wide proposals and opportunities. I'm happy to go to questions.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I have a number of members wishing to ask questions. We'll start with Councillor Morgan, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Victoria, thank you very much for this report and for going through it quite thoroughly with us this evening. I think we can all turn around and give you stories about different floodings throughout the borough, both north and south. But I just want to pick up on a couple of points. You mentioned Joel Street and the River Pin. Just to clarify, there are two parts to this. There's the river pin itself, which is at the bottom of Joel Street, but we have a feeder that goes into the pin, which is further up Joel Street. And a lot of the flooding actually starts from that feeder, where it's fly tipping, basically, that's causing the issue. People are just dumping it over the bridge, blocking the feeder, and so it overflows into Joel Street and runs down the hill. What are we doing to try and alleviate these issues of the fly tipping and clearing the areas? I must say a big thank you to, whilst we're on, to the residents throughout the borough called the Hillingdon litter pickers, who've been going round lately clearing the rubbish, not just from the feeders, the pin and such like, but also from the galleries and other places. But I'd like to know what we are doing as a council to try and tackle the fly tipping on this that's causing the flooding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morgan. Yes, I'm very well aware of the issues, particularly on the Joel Street ditch. Yes, it is quite a large catchment actually that runs into the river pin and contributes a lot of flow into the river pin. So the project that we are looking at is looking at that whole catchment as well as the bottom end where it sort of enters the river pin. I think the particular area you were referring to with the fly tipping and the littering has been an issue in the past. I think lots of debris and other things have been washed down to a screen which is just upstream of Joel Street itself, and our highways team regularly clear that. So they visit that site to make sure that they are aware of the build-up of rubbish and quite often what is vegetation that comes down, and they clear that 3 times a week, and more when there may be adverse weather forecast, so that they can maintain and try and keep on top of that volume. So I am very thankful to all those people who do go out and really pick up the litter that gets left, because ultimately, particularly in heavy rain, it does get washed into gullies and screens like that, which do contribute to the issue. So I'm definitely very grateful for them. But in that particular case, yes, our highways team are aware of and regularly monitor it.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, do you wish to have a supplementary?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. Victoria, if we can take this offline, I could perhaps give officers a bit more information about, especially the area for Joel Street. Having lived here for many years, I know why there's a lot of water going in there, and maybe it's something that I can take up with officers outside this meeting.
We would be very welcome to your for your feedback. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kaufman. You're on mute, Councillor Kaufman. If I had £1 for every time I've said that to people.
Sorry about that, Chairman. Vicky, we talk about block gullies, block drains, etc., and then what we do then is to mow all the grass verges and then blow all the grass clippings into the curb, which then get sort of pushed down into the actual gullies and sewers. I think this might be a sort of economic thing where grass boxes are probably extremely expensive, but I should imagine that cleaning out sewers are not cheap. Have we ever looked at this equation of putting grass boxes on instead of just mowing it into the actual gutter?
Well, I think vegetation can often decay in more quickly than certainly some of the other things like litter that get washed in. I don't think our green spaces team and our highways team have particularly compared the implication or the costs of what they do and how they do it, but that's something I would be happy to discuss with them to sort of compare, because I think it is always worth considering what the implication and costs are versus containing sort of things that might need to get cleared up afterwards versus the clear up that is required.
Yeah, sure. Can I just have one more, Chairman?
Of course.
The Yedding Brook round the West End Road, going through Coronation Walk and then out to the marshes. Yeah. Several residents regularly phone me up and say, you know, a willow has dropped into the river. And then we get on to sort of the civic and nothing seems to get done. And then this builds up and builds up and builds up till you're in a sort of flood situation. I mean, who do we actually go to when you've got situations like that?
I know this is a very topical issue for many councillors, particularly with the recent flooding. Where it is a main river, which the Yedding Brook is, as is the River Colne and the
Sure.
River Pin running through Hillingdon. If it is causing an imminent flood risk, the recommended advice is to report that to the Environment Agency. They have an incident hotline. I would happily share this with Democratic Services, that information, but that information is also on the council flooding webpage, and you can phone or email them with that information for them to investigate, and they will investigate whether they also deem that as an imminent flood risk, and where they don't, they will report that to the private or the landowner that they're aware of to ask them to remove that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lakmana.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, Victoria, thank you for the information. One of the things that you mentioned was that the gullies get cleaned annually. Is that an audit kept of the cleaning that's done?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Is that
yes, of course, yes. The annual gully cleaning that takes place, is that an audit kept of the cleanup?
An audit of the...
Yeah. Is there a record, or is there an audit done of the roads, the gullies that have been cleaned?
As far as I know, the highways team have a contractor that go out and they report back to highways of the gullies that they have visited. For example, sometimes there may be cars that are parked over certain gullies and other things. So right. I understand that they do report, their contractors do report back to say yes, we've done this road, and obviously highways keep a record of those things.
Okay, the reason for me asking that was that some of the residents that have been affected by floods in the past would dispute this annual clean that we've just talked about. Chair, if I may, I have a second question.
Yes, of course, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you. The second one, Victoria, you mentioned that the council is doing a report on the flooding incidents that took place in October and January, February. Yes. Are the local councillors going to be inputting into this report?
I would happily accept any sort of information that councillors are aware of. I would seek information from anybody to provide reports to the flooding team so that we can understand where there were issues.
Wonderful.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I know that some local councillors were actively involved with the flooding that took place in their wards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
we'll
you.
capture everything.
Thank you, Chair.
As much
Thank
as
you,
possible.
Victoria.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you very much, Victoria. It's nice seeing you actually for once. I often see you, hear you on the phone, but first time of seeing you. I like to talk about the responsibilities of riparian owners. Now, these are vital to maintain healthy rivers and avoid flooding. Can the council be much more effective by demanding the riparian owners fulfil their duties? Can they be fined if they do not deal with large trees blocking rivers? And if not, you know, can this be a policy that we can consider? Because what's been happening, especially in my ward, is that some landowners are taking absolutely no notice of the fact that very large trees are clogging up the rivers. And even though we report it to the Environment Agency, the residents report it to me, it's reported to you, but we seem to be going round and round and round in circles. And some of these trees have been, huge trees have been in the rivers for the last 18 months, reported to the Environment Agency and through me to the council. So can we be much more effective in actually demanding that the owners of land where trees are creating such a problem with our rivers can be fined in some way, possibly?
I think there's a number of questions within that I'll try and address. Obviously, the council have a responsibility where we own land to remove the trees that are on the land that we own. I know our Green Spaces team are active in doing that and have cleared the trees, particularly in the West Drayton area on our land that residents were concerned about. The River Colne, particularly in the West Drayton area, has been a particular issue, and the Environment Agency have admitted that it has suffered from a lack of maintenance on their part over the last few years. What they have undertaken is a comprehensive survey of all of the trees that have fallen down from in the West Drayton area right down to Longford and to Heathrow, to identify those and the key ones that pose a flood risk. That list runs to more than 200 sites or locations. I have been out on site and seen them undertaking that work, so they have started that programme, and I'm continuing to ensure that they follow this up and continue working on those as a high priority. Obviously, in this case, this is where the Environment Agency are stepping in. I would agree that the Environment Agency should lead on this as a main river, but they have been very ineffective in securing private landowners to take action. The difficulty is for the council is that there are no obvious powers that we would have to be able to insist on those private landowners undertaking this work. Those powers rest with the Environment Agency. So there is a difficulty in quite what powers we could use. Certainly we're exploring with the antisocial behaviour team if there is a way of being able to undertake those works and possibly claim back the costs of doing that. But we require their permission, the private landowners' permission in order to do that, which they're probably unlikely to give us. I think it's a long-term issue to solve, and certainly something that I'm raising with the Environment Agency at a national level to say this is not unique to Hillingdon. This is an issue that is a much wider issue that we need support on in order that we can penalise those people, and I agree, I would love to be able to do that so that we can secure their delivery of what is their riparian duties.
If I could have a follow-up question.
Yes,
it's specifically on the issue of the major flooding that's occurred in West Drayton. There have been a large petition of residents asking for action. That letter came from the 3 councillors for West Drayton that went to Emma Howard-Boyd, the chair of the Environment Agency. We had a response back saying, yes, it's in hand. Of course, my moles, Wind in the Willows haven't got it's not the only way of having moles. We've got moles as well in West Drayton, and my moles told me that no work had been done. And so there was a further letter that was sent on the 7th of December from the 3 councillors from West Drayton. Response on the 30th of December by Darsha Gill, the Area Flood and Coastal Risk Manager, saying we were doing this, we were doing that, the Environment Agency were doing this, they were doing that, and that there was, they were reviewing the maintenance, they were employing a contractor, they've taken out trees, etc., and that we would have a February update. Well, we've not had a February update, and my lovely moles going along the riverbanks are telling me no work done. Now, we are very, very frustrated. And there will be a further letter, I think, going to the highest level, because the one letter that went from the 5th of November to the chair also went to the leader of the council, also went to the MP, and we are still looking at very, very large trees being in our rivers. So can you do anything to move this issue on with the Environment Agency, because we have been promised and the promise has not been fulfilled?
I totally understand your frustration, and I have had similar frustrations in contacting my counterparts in the Environment Agency. I do now have a contact within the asset management team who has provided me with the survey that they have undertaken and the sort of prioritised list that they are working through, and I am now having regular meetings. So I think I'm hoping I have secured sort of better communication from them now to us, at least, which I will be able to pass on to you. I have specifically raised the question of the particular trees that were raised by a local resident, to say when is this on their programme, and so that I can bring that information back to you, because yeah, I appreciate your frustrations in that they haven't been very specific about what they've been proposing to do and when, and it is something that I am regularly raising with them, that they need to improve with their communication with us and with residents, because I understand, and as I said, I have seen them on site. This was in Longford, so I can appreciate those residents sort of further up the catchment are seemingly frustrated, but I have seen them out doing works, and so I think the signs are positive that they are learning from this, and I will continue obviously to hold them to account, and I hope that the sort of the better lines of communication with the Environment Agency are now open.
Thank you very much.
Are there any members who have not yet asked a question who wish to ask one? If so, please indicate now. If not, I will go back to those who have already asked questions. Yep, I see you, Councillor Wiesner. I'll put you in the queue. Councillor Kaufmann. Oh dear, Councillor Kaufmann. What am I going to do with you? You know what I'm going to say, so I'm not even going to say it.
Vicky, just to go back to the question of gully cleaning. Now, I'm not a sort of an expert on gully cleaning, but I've always wondered what the yellow or blue marks were on the drain. And what they are is each year they have a different colour to say that the drains have been cleaned. So that's that's how they tell whether a drain has been cleaned or not. Now, I might be wrong here, Vicky, and you can sort of go and investigate this if you like, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Thank you, Chairman. Mike.
Thank you very much. Vicky, did you want to?
Yes, as far as I understand, that is correct.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Are you a millionaire yet? Have you claimed the money off Councillor Kaufman?
It's building up nicely. I think we can go for a drink after lockdown, Councillor Morgan.
Just following on from Councillor Sweeting, the rivers and canals throughout the borough are actually owned by the Canals and River Trust. Are we having much success with them in keeping the land tidy, because they actually control, or that the land within I think it's about 5 yards either side of the canal is their land. They're responsible for that. So what's joy or what success are we having with them in ensuring that the rivers and canals are clear, and the land either side is also clear?
I think land ownership is a very complicated thing. The Canal and River Trust do own quite a lot of land, but not always on both sides of the canal. And I think it is mainly related to just the canal and not the rivers as well. And that is part of the problem. With riparian ownership and ensuring that people can and should take action on their land, is actually identifying all of those landowners across the council, across the whole borough, that may own a bit of land. There's certainly a lot of confusion in terms of it's not just those big organisations that own land and who are responsible and tend to be quite good at actually taking action, like the Canal and River Trust. They have a national reporting system. You can report issues to them. What is often more difficult is the smaller private landowners, or where, for example, you often have a number of people who have a house with a long garden, and at the end of the garden is a river, and actually in many cases they are also responsible for maintaining that part of up to the middle of the bank of the river. And actually people are not often aware of that riparian ownership responsibility, and certainly many sort of the smaller private landowners don't take much action, and so the enforcement action and the opportunities we have to penalise them are what we really need to try and explore.
Do you wish to follow up, Councillor Morgan? Okay. We've been on this topic now for a while, so I think we'll finish off with Councillor Sweeting and then we'll move on, if that's okay. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you very much. Has Hillingdon the officer capacity to monitor the state of its rivers, as it took reports from local residents coming through to me to advise that the council that the trees from the council's own land had fallen and had blocked the river Frays. So I must admit that when the work was done to clear those trees, it was done very, very well by the contractors. But it had to go through quite a few stages before that work was done, and the report came from residents. It didn't come from any officers seeing that there was a problem. And of course, we're talking about riparian duties and owners. Well, Hillingdon Council is also a riparian owner, and they didn't in that case notice these very large trees that had fallen in the river. So have you got the capacity in your team to do the monitoring required?
I agree that the council is a riparian owner in many cases and has a responsibility. Much of that land is managed by our Green Spaces team, who regularly visit those sites and do monitor the locations where there are issues, and obviously bring in contractors where we need to, as they did in the West Drayton area. I would say I would welcome any reports from residents to make sure that we are aware of those issues. Obviously, the quicker that it is reported to us and we are aware of it, then we can take action. So I would welcome those reports so that we can take action. I think it is about all of the services working together to make sure that we then take action about those issues that are obviously of importance to residents.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Just follow up.
If I can just ask as well, when are local councillors advised of any flooding incidents in their wards? Because the October 2020 incident came to me via residents rather than the council, and the same happened in the January-February incident at the caravan park. We weren't advised first.
I think both of those events happened at the weekend, and I think we would need to review quite what that process was and ensure we review that. Obviously, if you didn't feel that you got that information as quickly as you would have liked to have received that from us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vicky.
No problem.
And thank you for your presentation this evening, Victoria, and thank you for the members for their questions. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda now, Victoria, so feel free to go if you wish to do so. Thank you once again.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to item 6, which is our witness session for the review into the Adult and Community Learning Service. Good evening to you, Deborah, and please feel free to start whenever you wish to do so.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'll just, as you know, I've submitted some papers. I'll just take you through briefly the first of those. We agreed that we would make this session about what's coming up, opportunities, challenges. I've split the paper into a few sections. The first one is additional funding. This is partly because it comes under the threats and challenges, the strengths and challenges slightly later, but also because we just finished a 2-year project that I felt was relevant for you to know about, given that I only submitted the paper last week, which we happily called SIP. So if I refer to it as that, please forgive me. The Strategic Investment Pot. There's another appendix that gives you far more detail about that. We have also just put together another funding bid, which we will hear about in June, looking at potential courses around digital training, health and social care, and creative industries. Another thing in terms of this wider subject is our last Ofsted report, and again it felt appropriate to put that in front of you so that you've got the chance to scrutinise it and look at it. It happened in 2019, which means we shouldn't have another Ofsted inspection until 2022 from the September, which only really gives us another year or so. They can come in any time from then. They might be 2 years after that, but they could be September the 1st, so we just don't know. The report again is attached. And then headline opportunities and challenges, which sort of speaks for itself, really. These are things that, I mean, obviously, this is my service and I know it well. I could go on for ages, but I tried to sort of just highlight half a dozen or so key ones just to sort of give you some idea of the things that I see as quite pertinent to this meeting. So hopefully that's kind of given you an introduction, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Sweeting. Yes,
thank you very much, Debbie. I've looked very carefully at that SIP bid. You've got 470k for it last time, and it's such a wonderful amount of work that you were able to undertake for that amount of money. But are we not in the position that that may well not be coming our way next time, that the 470k or something similar is not going to be forthcoming? So how will the service overcome this funding shortfall? Because all of the items on that list that you've been undertaking are so very, very vital.
Yeah. Well, actually, when we were asked to write the brief, we worked to something very, very broad. I'm just going to take my earphones out because I'm getting some feedback. Excuse me a second. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. So what we did was we sat, myself and a colleague, and we said, what are all the things that we know we need to do that we can't get funding for, that we can't use our grant funding for? So everything on this is not generally funded by the grant. And then when we got the bid through, it was approved, and we just went through, it was almost a wish list on our part, all the things that we always really wanted to invest time and effort in that we couldn't do. When we got it, there was a decision made that we would run everything internally. So rather than appoint people for a 2-year programme, we managed it. We did all the work ourselves. We used tutors who work all sorts of staff that work sessionally, so they could take up, I don't know, supposing they work 6 hours a week for us, they would do potentially another 2 to 10 or whatever that we needed to do specific bits. What that's done, and we did the management, the project management, myself and a colleague. What that's actually done is that it's brought the expertise and the learning is now securely within the service. So, and it's enabled us to we've had sort of a view on sustainability from day one. So it's enabled us to put things in place that can be sustained. So for instance, originally the thought was that we would put together an information advice and guidance team. Actually, all of the established staff have become that team. With all those that hadn't already done it have undertaken specific training in it. And so when a resident rings up to find out which course to do or how to become, I don't know, a plumber or whatever it is they want to know, we've got a choice of about 35, 40 people, most of whom can take those questions and give them some really good careers and education advice. So we kind of wrote the bid with it in mind that these were things we couldn't usually fund, and these were obviously not just that, but based on borough needs. It wasn't just our wish list, it was what are the things we know we need to do that we can't. And because the expertise has stayed in-house, we've got a much greater chance of sustaining the work than we would have had those people just headed off at the end of the project.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I'd like to sort of talk about the services as a whole. We all know that your service is good. You all are very much aware of the tremendous work that you've done during the pandemic. So maybe we could ask you for any recommendations that will be included in our final report to Cabinet. Now, we have got some already, I think, listed on page 23, which is to undertake and find ways of making more residents aware of the support that your service provides. Then we talk about undertaking work to strengthen partnerships. Then about new branding, that's a lovely phrase, isn't it? And then about achieving greater funding, including maybe doing battle with the GLA and maybe finding ways of gaining back the 60k lost from the council. And also investigating ways of making your booklets much more user friendly. I mean, your guide, this guide, which I picked up, is absolutely brilliant, fantastic. The other one takes a little bit more of a read to read. But anyway, coming back to you know your service. What other recommendations could you put forward to us as members that you would like to be included in the recommendations to Cabinet?
Councillor Sweeting, before you finish that, I think Neil's indicating, do you wish to come in before we move? Yep, okay, go ahead, Neil. I'll come back to you shortly, Councillor Sweeting, if you just hold on a second.
Thanks, Chairman. I just thought I'd interject just before Debbie answers, just to give some clarity around the next steps of this process. So this is the end of our information gathering sessions, unless members feel that more is required. The next steps are that I will be collating the information gathered, and then in conjunction with Debbie and other officers, looking at really pinning together some of the key themes that have come out of this review, with a view to then bringing back some draft recommendations for the committee to scrutinise and comment on at the next meeting. So Debbie and I will be doing that piece of work after this meeting, not exactly after this meeting, not immediately, but certainly after this meeting. And so, I mean, you've mentioned some of those there. Debbie might have some other ideas, but that will then come out during further dialogue offline that I will then share with the committee at the next meeting.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Sweeting, do you wish to continue?
No, I can see where the next step will be, but I just wondered, you know, if Debbie had any extra information they could provide for members.
I think the only other thing, and I can't remember, you might have covered it, the only other thing that I can think of is just to try to strengthen our governance arrangements. From an Ofsted perspective, and obviously they're hugely influential in the work that we do, they are very keen that I work closely with either some kind of, you know, the line management within the council, those structures, or with elected members, or with this kind of thing where you have support and challenge, and you ask me questions that, you know, that's what they're after for me. And this whole experience, from my point of view in terms of Ofsted, will be really useful, because that's what this has all been about, and how do we improve the service and so on. So I think possibly, you know, at the end of this review, I don't know, never having been through this before, I don't know whether I'll come back annually or you know, never again, or I don't know how it works. I'm learning. Neil's walking me through it. But I think that, I mean, I'm sort of toying with the idea of seeing if we can put together some kind of advisory board. We worked a couple of years ago with Councillor Simmons to put together a governing body, but I'm not convinced that was the right format for what we needed, because the governance structures are so embedded in the council that it wasn't really a governing body, wasn't really the right tool. I think possibly a more informal but still as challenging advisory board, perhaps with sort of potentially with member involvement, potentially with other officers, certainly definitely with some learners on there, with some partners, you know, the key stakeholders around, so that I can be saying, well, you know, I think we do this really well, and because the paper and the understanding of the service builds up over time, whoever's on that board could say, well, I'm not so sure about that, because last time you told us this and this time you're telling us that. It's that kind of thing that they want. They want more evidence of that. And while it happens, it's quite informal currently. So I think that's one of them. The other one that springs to mind is that I am a little concerned, and this came up last time, about the changes in Harlington, in our Harlington Centre, which is actually Pinkwell School. Although the council's worked really hard on our behalf, and I'm sure with the libraries as well, to get some accommodation in place for us, the amount of accommodation is quite substantially reduced, and also it is only for 2 years. So when the change happens, we've only got 2 years, and that is our only centre in the south of the borough, and our main centre there, and deals with most of our English, maths, ESOL and other elements of our curriculum. So in the medium term, that would be the other thing that I think would be a challenge.
Thank you. I have other members wishing to ask questions, Councillor Sweeting. You've had your follow-up. But do you wish to make an observation before I move on? Or?
Well, just on that very issue of capacity, and knowing the information that we're getting on school places, and that some of our primaries are not filled, you know, has there been any investigation? I'm talking to some of our primaries to see whether there is a a wodge of accommodation. I mean, I know that we're going to have a report coming to our June meeting on school places, and at that meeting maybe we will have information on some of our primaries where their planned admission numbers are being considered for reduction. And at that stage, maybe there can be some joined up thinking between the adult learning service and our primaries and the council working together to see if there's one primary, and I can think of one which is not too far away from Hillingdon, that may well have unfilled accommodation that they could possibly use for adult learning.
Would you like me to answer, Chair?
Yes, if you want to briefly comment before we move on to the next person.
Okay. Yep. What I would say is I think it's very early days at this point. We're still trying to work on the school. So I'm not trying to suggest that this is an immediate issue, but time goes quickly. I think this links very much into branding. I think that the students in the south of the borough see Harlington as a brand. They're going to Harlington. Now, it could be in the middle of Hayes, or it's not that it has to be in that particular venue, but wherever we need to have some kind of base that we can have our teams to do all the information, advice and guidance, the careers information and so on, and deliver the classes. And so whilst it's absolutely no problem, we frequently deliver in a whole number of schools, I think we do still need to be looking for a base that's easy for people to get to, because they just will vote with their feet otherwise and not go. But that might be the school you're thinking of, I don't know.
Thank you very much. Mr. Little?
Thank you, Chair. I think since Debbie has mentioned it, I ought to declare that I'm a governor of Harlington School. My questions were about something else, though. Firstly, in terms of partnership work, do you do any work with employers as to what training needs, what preparatory to working needs those employers have? And my second question is also on partnership, but relates to the Workers' Education Association and the University of the Third Age. Do you do any work with them, or are they regarded as competitors?
I would say we don't actually do any work with them, but it's not so much that they're competitors. I think there's plenty of work to go around, to be quite honest. It's just a capacity issue. You know, we're busy doing the work we're doing, and sometimes we can't get out to everybody. So I think they're probably in the same position, but that would be something to explore, definitely. In terms of employers, yes, we do work with them, but we don't work with them as much as I want us to. It's one of my priorities that we're moving into a lot more. I mean, if you look at certain sectors, childminding and lots of the schools, so kind of childcare generally, working in schools, teaching and learning, all of those, we've got quite solid partnerships. Likewise in some aspects of retail, so with floristry is a good example. We've got good links with local interpreting services through our community interpreting programme. So in some aspects we have. If we get, there are two things going on to try to address that, because I want to make that more robust. I do think it's something we could improve on. One is that we've actually appointed somebody to be one of the senior managers in the service, and her responsibility will be the qualification courses plus employment, and that is sort of employer partnerships. And she's already started to work on that, but she's currently covering the job she left within the service because we're trying to recruit to it. So we've got that bit of a lag at the moment, but that will start to really move things forward, to be able to have a named person that can be leading on that. The other thing is that if we get this next bid, we've got some partnerships lined up in the creative industries sector in the borough that are hopefully going to bear fruit. And what I've told my team is that whether we get the bid or not, I want that to happen. So we've got work going on now to develop things around sort of kind of made film based really. So working around, I think I know we're going to be doing makeup courses and how to then that will move on, and costume design and costume creation. That's another area that we're going to develop, but the work's going on at the moment, ready to start to deliver that in September. So we're getting there, but I think that we've got stronger community partners at the moment, and that's something that we're working to improve.
Thank you. Mr. Little, do you wish to have a follow-up question?
More a couple of follow-up comments. One is, it strikes me that if you're going to have some form of advisory board, there ought to be some sort of representation from commercial sectors. And the second one is that, without wishing in any way to criticise or decry the work that's done, it does seem quite a narrow base, given the range of industries that exist within the borough that are undoubtedly, many of them, looking for better trained people.
No, absolutely, I would agree. It's not something that's fully evolved yet. I mean, we focus on micro businesses. We know there are providers. Obviously, we've got some idea about local data. We know there are local providers who work with the larger organisations. The ones that we focus on are the micro businesses, the really small ones, often one-man bands. But also it reflects the fact that the target group we work with are those that are furthest away from employment. So it's like a pyramid, really. You know, you've got a lot of people coming in with fairly low-level skills. I mean, obviously we have some that aren't like that, but a good 50% of our learners are working at entry 3 and below. And then gradually they drop off, they go and get work, they go and do whatever else they're going to do. So you have fewer moving up into vocational areas. And so it's a question of trying to meet the needs of the most deprived groups, which tend to be much more about English, maths, ESOL, digital skills, those basic skills, while still trying to encourage people into work, in the middle of also trying to work with quite a small, it's not tiny, but it's quite a small funding envelope. So there's only so much we can do. And over the years, it's been a question of, what I didn't want to do is go too wide, look great on paper, but actually not do anything well. So there are lots of reasons that have led us to this, but that's why I'm kind of really keen to try to increase our core funding. And I know, I'm not expecting you guys to solve that for me, but I push and push and push and push and push with it. I'm always lobbying the GLA to try to increase that, because with that comes more staff, with that comes more expertise, but also the ability to take your eye away from an exam for a moment and get it into building another relationship with an employer. And I completely agree with you. With the governing body, we had employers coming on, although attendance was slightly iffy. But again, we worked on micro businesses, because what we tend to find is that the people that we do train want to set up their own businesses. So quite often they'll go into that first sort of couple of years of business, which is obviously oftentimes the most vulnerable. And so we try to do things like how to start. I think we've got one, well, I know we have, that's been running this year, that's how to grow your floristry business, how to grow your horticulture business. And we've had people that are tutors who have run their businesses that are teaching those learners, those residents who are maybe have finished, say, a level 2 vocational course, aren't quite ready to start the level 3, which maybe would kick off in September. And so we've given them how to run your business, which luckily has been SIP funded, so we've been able to do it for nothing. But we're trying to really target what we offer so that what we do well. But I do agree with you. It's definitely something I want to increase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman, turn your mic on.
No, I'm all right, Chairman. Thank you.
In that case, there are no other members wishing to ask questions. I know you have a video to show us, Debbie. I don't know if you want to show that now, and that might sort of... Neil, you're waving panically. What's happening?
If you remember correctly, Chairman, we're going to watch the video at the end of the meeting once we move to part 2.
Okay, that's fine. Will we go into part 1 though, if there's questions from the video?
I'm not expecting any questions. If there are, I would suggest that we can feed them through me,
Okay.
and I can have them answered offline following the meeting.
Any other members wishing to ask questions before I move on? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Debbie. We'll move on to the other items quickly, and then we'll come back to the part 2 item. So we'll move on now to our next item on the agenda, which is the Cabinet 4 Plan, item 7. Are there any comments or questions? No, in which case can we note that? Yep, thank you. And item 8 is our work programme, pages 49 to 52. Councillor Sweeting.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There are quite a few of the one-off service monitoring reports that have got no dates attached to them. We did ask at the last meeting that the youth services report, that we will be given a date on that. And so I would ask if this particular item, the youth services, has a date on as soon as possible, but we've also got early years provision to be confirmed, HS2 update to be confirmed. So I would ask that some of these items are actually dated before we have the next meeting, if it's in this format, of course, because I know there's going to be some changes on POCs.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, you're not the only one to have noticed that. It is something I'm looking at regularly. Where I am able to, I am putting in dates, and where I have yet to secure a date, I am liaising with the officers to secure that date. Some of it is to do with resource and the unique challenges posed by the current and hopefully coming to an end pandemic, and partly it's because the reason for their original postponement, such as the youth services item and the information that Dan Kennedy provided at the last meeting, those things are still ongoing, and as yet officers are not in a position to confirm when the item might actually be suitable for consideration by the committee. But I am doing my very best to secure those dates for you, and I will continue to do so. Hopefully I will have further updates by the next meeting.
Yes, and can I just confirm that we are going to have 2 separate reports going forward on standards and school improvement, because this was something that the committee highlighted last time. Well, I highlighted it, and I think it would be a better way forward, because we all commented, I think, that it was quite a weighty report.
Yeah, so the information that I presented to members on email earlier today did have a brief update stating that Abby Preston and the other officers have taken on board that suggestion, and they have carried out a review and they have somewhat changed the most recent the cabinet report to the most recent meeting, but for the future POC reports they will be taking on further advice from the committee and making those changes. Whether that is literally 2 reports, I don't know. I will ask them to confirm that.
Thank you very much. I cannot see anyone else indicating, so we're happy to note the work programme apart from the points raised. Thank you very much. At this stage, I would like to, well, we should say goodbye to our members of the public watching from home as we go into part 2, and I'll now ask Neil to begin that process and move us into part 2 accordingly. Thank you.